It's Tuesday, September 16th. Welcome to Scouting the League. Before long, I will be handing the reins of today's show over to Neil Stratton as he dives into an analytics and really interesting scouting conversation with Matt Manocherian of Sports Info Solutions, along with Bryce Rossler of Sports Info Solutions. You can find both of those guys over on X at Matt Mano and at BT Rossler. Make sure you're following Sports Info Solutions football division at football_SIS. Give our show a follow as well. We are Scouting the League, and I am Rodrik David at Right Step ADV is where you can find me. Neil Stratton is at Inside the League. InsideTheLeague.com is his website. For all our content we're bringing you throughout the week, long format, short format, conversations on scouting, and so much more. But let's get to that intro music, and then we will kick it over to Neil here today on Scouting the League.
All right, we welcome Bryce Rossler and longtime friend Matt Manocherian to the Scouting the League podcast, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk some football. All right, we may have already seen the best game of the season. Last Sunday night, we got to see the Ravens against the Bills. What a contest. I can't believe anyone would come away from that game saying, boy, I wish something different would have happened. But let's focus on the quarterbacks. If Josh Allen's playing for the Ravens and Lamar Jackson is playing for the Bills, who wins that game? And at this point, which one of those quarterbacks would you have your money on as the best in the league between those two?
I think that's a difficult question to answer just because these systems are so designed around these quarterbacks' unique talents. So I think it's hard to just paste them into a vacuum like that.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know that the result would be different if the quarterbacks changed necessarily. I thought both quarterbacks played extremely well. I think really the pendulum swing in that game is the Derrick Henry fumble, and then things came unraveled off of that. But I don't want to overreact to this game because I felt that the Ravens were dominant throughout much of the contest. The Bills defense did not look particularly good. And the Ravens just opened a window for Josh Allen, who had been playing pretty well outside of a couple dropped interceptions, to do what he does and come back and take it. But I know that people sort of want to pit these two against one another, especially in the context of last year's MVP race. But I think both are excellent. Both do different things very well. And
Neil, I heard him say a lot of words. I didn't hear him pick one though. I don't know. Did you? I didn't.
Well, I'm putting him on the spot a little bit here, Matt, and so it's probably not fair to say that. I may have also implicated that these two were the top two quarterbacks in the league.
I'll take issue with that one
right now. Is it still Patrick? I mean,
it's Mahomes for me every day of the week.
Mahomes
every day of the week, no doubt about it. I'm not even blinking. If you ask me, I get one player who I'm taking. There's no question about it. I will say this, going back to Allen against Lamar, I agree with Bryce that if you switch them, both teams are probably worse because of how they're built. I think there is legitimacy to that. If I'm going to answer your question and not shy away like Bryce here, I would say right now, I think it's Josh Allen, which is kind of crazy how far we've come with him. I actually found myself almost rooting for him the other day, which has never even happened to me before. I never even thought that might happen. So I think it's probably, if you transplant him onto the Ravens, they're probably better than the Bills. But I'll also say this, with Lamar Jackson on the Ravens, I also think they're better than the Bills. They were much more efficient throughout the game. It was like their offense was too explosive. Bryce and I were discussing it on the SIS Off the Charts football podcast today. Just that same idea. And I really, when you look at this game, the thing that kind of surprised me when I took a step back at the end, besides the fact that somehow the Bills won, was Josh Allen's underlying stats, the way that we break things down. EPA is a very common analytical way to look at different performance things, but that's really a team metric. The Bills had the best passing EPA in the league as an offense. However, in terms of our stats, total points, which divides the credit amongst the players, Allen was down at 13th, which is hard to believe when he had that epic 250-yard fourth quarter. The first three quarters weren't that great. There were some incompletions. Bryce mentioned some dropped interceptions. So as much as you'd love to have the tiebreaker and the win, if I'm coming out of that game, I want to pump everybody's brakes and say, I know it's 1 week and it's the only week that we have to go off of right now, but it's just one game in the season. And the Ravens still look pretty formidable.
And the other thing about this game, I think, if you had to put it like, well, hopefully editing can cut that out. If you had a gun to my head, I'd probably say that I take Lamar over Josh. I don't think you can really go wrong with either. But the thing I want to point out in that game is that the Ravens' running game was just so good that Lamar didn't have to carry his offense in the same way that Josh did. So I think when we talk about this game, like Matt loves to talk about overreacting to week one, Josh in that game clearly had to do the heavy lifting more so than Lamar has. Now, Lamar's done that in the past for the Ravens, right? I'm not saying that he never carries games for them, but Derrick Henry was running all over the place. And I think that sort of colors our performance or our assessment of how those guys compare to one another because of the head-to-head matchup and how the game played out.
Neil, can I turn it around on you?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I was thinking of questions that if I was the interviewer interviewing you that I'd want to ask. And I wanted to hear from your perspective, going totally off the rails here. The NBA stuff with the Pablo Torre and all that kind of stuff and salary cap circumvention. You know the worlds of agents better than anybody I know. Could you imagine this sort of thing in the NFL and kind of like what's your perspective on it right now? Because it feels like one of those things where everybody's got an opinion on, oh, it's nothing, Ballmer's fine, all the way to, he should have the team just taken away from him like Donald Sterling.
Well, I think one of the biggest surprises of the last, 10 years, let's say 20 years, since the 2009 CBA was renegotiated, on the player side, on the negotiation side, was, I guess, how the NFLPA decided, again, under the previous executive director who's not around anymore, to basically throw away the results that supported the fact that there was collusion by the owners on quarterback deals. And, that Deshaun Watson deal could have been a true watershed moment in the history of contracts, especially as they relate to quarterbacks, but as they relate to everybody else. And kind of throwing away that evidence was a big deal. And I think whoever the next executive director is, and it looks like there's a good chance that the interim will become the permanent, I think will really seize on that. I think that's one of the mistakes Lloyd Howe made, and maybe that's one reason why events took place that ultimately ended him no longer being there. But everyone's looking to circumvent the cap in one way or another. There are a lot of issues that I kind of have with the way the rules are written. It's the idea of immediately of putting years on, extending a signing bonus into years that immediately disappear once you reach there is weird to me, and I think it's probably confusing to your rank and file fan or you're a dumb guy, and I'm kind of both of those. So I don't know, Matt. I mean, it's a really kind of a gray area, but I think it's certainly one that I think interests fans, and I think will continue to. So many of these things are critical to management, and we've seen the better teams massage the cap, move money around, make the right decisions on who they're going to extend, make the wrong decisions, and it all impacts how teams are made. So ultimately, I think, everyone's kind of trying to play fast and loose with it. I think it is, I think as NFL guys, I like our cap being a little harder rather than the NBA's, which is really kind of soft and maneuverable, is my understanding. Despite the fact that there is always going to be a few people that kind of get away with stuff, generally speaking, I think that the cap is a good one, and I think hopefully it's here to stay, and will at least give some modicum of competitive balance to the teams in the league from the larger markets as well as the smaller markets.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the NFL moving in the direction of leagues that have like looser restrictions on that sort of stuff, given the successful place and they're in. They would have to have a really good reason to do that. But I look at college football, And with NIL now, even there's the rule where you have to actually do something in order to get NIL money, right? Like it's sort of salary cap circumvention, but like as long as there's value to the business.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one part where I'm like, even if you applied NIL rules to Kawhi Leonard, they would have said, no, you actually have to do a commercial or something. You have to have some activity in order to earn this money, or else it looks a lot like collusion to me.
Right. The difficulty, I think, and we've already seen that, is that finding true NIL deals for players, especially college football players who are largely unknown outside their own markets, who play with helmets on, is a really difficult proposition. And having worked with a lot of collectives as well as GMs and talked to them about that, it's a real hard push. And so I think generally speaking, even though we've got NIL Go and the players have the opportunity to sign NIL deals now, I think 99% of the money that's going to be coming from revenue sharing. And I think, and this is a conversation kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but finding revenue outside, I mean, just merely finding the revenue for revenue share is going to be a lot harder than I think a lot of people think it's going to be. We've seen big time schools cutting their staffs. We've seen smaller schools not changing their uniforms out as much. Anything they can do to try to find money in the sofa cushion, so to speak. And I think that's going to be a bigger factor than what a lot of people realize going forward.
Yeah, nice tree planting business as your sofa cushion is pretty good there.
Yeah, I know. Well, NBA players love to plant trees, right? That's what I've always heard. Okay. After week one, these quarterbacks were among the bottom 10 in passing yardage. Sam Darnold, Bryce Young, J.J. McCarthy, Tua Tagovailoa, and Cam Ward. Of that group, who winds up with the most yardage this season? Which couple quarterbacks are going to bounce back and really have signature seasons, guys?
What was the list of choices again? There was
Sam Darnold, Bryce Young, J.J. McCarthy, Tua Tagovailoa, and Cam Ward. So you got a rookie in there, you got a couple real veterans, and a couple guys who are still kind of on the come.
I'm going to guess that Bryce is going to begrudgingly choose Cam Ward because he hates everybody else on that list so much. No, you're choosing Darnold?
No, I thought Cam Ward played well last week, but the receiving room really appalled me. I think as much as I hate to do it, out of this group, I'm compelled to take Tua.
Whoa.
Which is a choice I do not feel great about. I have been very vocal about my disapproval of Tua's game, and I never thought that he was even a tier 2 quarterback in the NFL. But I think when you look at the situation in Tennessee, which I mentioned with Cam Ward, he's a rookie. His receivers aren't very good. Sam Darnold, I just don't think that that's what Seattle wants to be. Bryce Young, I don't have any belief in whatsoever. And J.J. McCarthy is probably in the best team situation, but he's also functionally a rookie. I don't know how much they trust him quite yet. And I think that just I bank more on McDaniel and company being able to figure it out and approximate some of the production they've had in the past at points. I think that it looked really ugly against the Colts, but if I have to pick anyone out of this group, it's Tua.
Okay, then I'm running to the podium with Cam Ward. I'm running to the podium because Tua's got too much injury risk for me. Aside from all of, like the on-field performance risk. So we were just talking about most yards. I think I'm going in that direction.
Here's the one that really intrigues me in that group, and this is kind of a different question, but who is Sam Darnold, guys? Do we know? Well, I mean, I was certainly ready to declare his career over after his run in Carolina, and then he goes out and surprises everybody in Minnesota last year. Now, with the Kubiak offense, which is going to be more running reliant, maybe that benefits him. Then again, maybe he gets lost in the shuffle there because it's yet another system he's having to learn over the course. I mean, I guess this is 3 systems in 3 years. What's y'all's take on Donald? Do you see him being successful this year?
I think it depends on what your barometer of success is. I think we kind of have a good read on who Sam Darnold is, though, after last year. Like, Sam Darnold was a quarterback who, for Kevin O'Connell, made all the throws that were asked of him. Like, he throws outside, he throws over the middle, he throws to all 3 levels. He doesn't do it consistently. He has some problems with his aggression and makes some bad decisions sometimes. But like at the end of the day, Sam Darnold, when I think about him, this is ultimately a quarterback who's going to give your playmakers a chance. And that's for better or for worse sometimes. And depending on what you have around him, like that is workable to some extent. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback. I also don't think that he's a complete and total loser. Like he's probably like bottom of that, like tier 3 for me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of just, I think what he is at this point.
Matt, what are your thoughts?
If you squint real hard, you can sort of resemble some Jared Goff if you're like, and that's like the most friendly thing to him. Top draft pick, has all of the arm talent in the world. That's never been anybody's question about either of these guys. If it's 7-on-7 and they're in the right coach with the right offense, it can look great. When the pressure comes, sometimes you get really worried about the way that looks. Obviously, he hasn't had the level of success that Goff has had the last few years, even last year. But like I said, if you squint, you can sort of make that comparison, I think. That's, I think, the best case scenario is a sort of Goffish career from this point out. What I like is it was a lot of big personnel for them this past week, 15 plays and 22 or 12 personnel. So really trying to muscle up, like you were saying, Neil, go into that zone run game like we always expect from those Shanahan tree offenses. Very zone heavy, very effective with the zone game. Lots of screen passes mixed in. It's 1 week, but relatively speaking, all these things that kind of make quarterback play a little bit easier. I think there's a reason why they're doing that, which is, not what you have to do when you have Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
But also by doing that, you give him a better chance to do what he can do well.
Okay. Now, speaking of 22 personnel, 2 of the top 7 rushing performances in week 1 were by rookies, guys. Meanwhile, we saw 3 running backs go in the top 36 picks. Are we going to start seeing teams value running backs differently? Are we going to start seeing more loaded backfields? Is the tide turning for the running back, which has been devalued in recent years?
Do I go first?
Going about it, I guess.
I think that the conversation about running back value is sort of interesting because I think it happened with scouts first, where we started to realize, hey, we can kind of replace these players. Hey, look at Olandis Gary kind of doing good things here. Like we can find these guys. And anybody who's been in a draft room knows when you get to the end of the draft, you got a whole bunch of running backs and wide receivers left over on your board and not a whole lot of anything else whatsoever. It's just the way that it goes, that these athletes exist. They're out there. Analytics is going to look at replacement level play, and they're going to look at how much you're dependent on your offensive line and all that kind of stuff. But I think that that's already kind of like run its course, and we're all pretty aware and maybe overconfident, to your point, Neil, about what we think we know about running backs. Problems are a couple of things. One, all this stuff is true, that it's tied into offensive line play. There's a lot of stuff about that value that's out of their control. So the days of Emmitt Smith, I think, are long gone. But also, there's clearly an effect that having a good running back has on your football team. Everybody wants a Derrick Henry on their football team, and he's been around for 10 years. It's just that that's the anomaly. That's not the rule. When we look at SIS, we look at what we call aging curves, which basically takes players as they enter the league and looks at them at different ages as they progress throughout their career. And usually you see a kind of peak and then a decline, right? We come in, we're rookies, we get a little bit better, we hit our peak phase, and then we decline. Running backs, you see them come into the league and you see them immediately start to decline on average. What you are when you walk into the league is about as good as you'll ever be. So in a way, I think that makes drafting running backs more rational, because if you can get a really good running back and get him on that first contract, it's great for you. But then I also think we have to think about this from a little bit of a human standpoint. Whereas if you have a running back that you draft and they play great on their first contract, I know there are a lot of geniuses sitting, in their basements thinking, well, you let that guy move on, you take the compensatory pick and you draft another guy. And I think that's all well and good. But if somebody performs well for you on their first contract, those are the people you want to give a second contract in order to build the winning culture and all of those intangible things that football coaches love to talk about. So I think that it's been oversimplified, and I'm happy we're getting back to an era of not looking at it overly simplistically, But at the same time, do I think that their salaries are going to skyrocket back up? Do I think that their draft capital is going to skyrocket again? I really don't.
So you
Right.
took that in a completely different direction than I was thinking.
Okay.
And when I don't necessarily disagree, but I'm approaching this from sort of a different angle. I think that when you talk about like the running backs don't matter debate, it was like why take a guy in the first round or why pay a guy when you can find a competent running back in the later rounds? I'm not sure how true that is anymore. And my hypothesis is that when you think about how the game is being taught and played at the lower levels of football, like youth and high school, what positions are the best athletes playing now?
Used to be running back. Now
It
it's
used to be
quarterback.
running back.
Yeah.
Now it's not anymore. And you have this proliferation of 7-on-7. So like that's what kids are spending their time doing. They're spending their time at receiver or quarterback, and they're running passing tree. And I suspect that now we might be getting into a period of where we're lagging behind youth football. And now that the talent at the running back position, just from an athletic standpoint, is not the same as it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I don't
So
have
that's
a way to
funny.
prove that at this point, but
No, it makes
I think
sense.
that might be happening.
The player pipeline leading players, the best athletes to a quarterback and wide receiver in these positions is actually sort of thinning out the running back skill set, which is actually creating more of a market again, or has the potential to in the future. I think
Right.
that's a pretty interesting thought.
And I don't know that it has effects across the whole market. It might be just at the top of the market is that you have you have less talent coming through the pipeline. So the guys who are really good are worth paying. And then it might remain the same for, obviously the rookie contract guys and like the mid-tier players, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's part of what's happening.
Well, I think part of what you're saying goes along with something else that I think is true, which is as the top of the contract. Neil knows this. If you're negotiating, whoever sets that market, that's going to have a trickle down effect on the rest of the market. So even if, like you're saying, Bryce, there are only some people that are worth paying that much, and it shouldn't affect everybody else, it will. And that's how we get into these cycles of finding these players that are undervalued. It's because it's tied to that.
Well,
And I think we've seen that for receivers too, right? Like even receivers that we would not consider great talents are starting to get paid really, really good money.
Paid like NBA players.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and it fascinated me when you have a guy who's a shutdown cornerback in college, arguably the best player in this draft, is we're going to give him some snaps at corner, but we're moving him right in the receiver room. That's fascinating to me. What's happening with Travis Hunter in Jacksonville? Because in the old days, if you had a Deion Sanders who could quote unquote take away one half of the field, that was invaluable. But now we want a guy who can not just take the top off the defense, but he can, move between the hashes and do all those kind of things and run the whole route tree. And that's, I guess, what Travis Hunter brings the Jags, which is really fascinating. All right,
I would have played him at corner, all things being
Same.
equal.
Say
But
again,
I
Matt,
do
I'm sorry?
respect these young guys doing their thing there.
Yeah. All right. So last question, guys. We're wrapping things up. Analytics, to me, and y'all may have a very different opinion because y'all work with teams, talk to teams, all those kind of things, remains very proprietary. How teams use the numbers is different. Some more successfully than others, some with more impact, some put more influence into their numbers than others. Have we gotten to a point yet where there is a generally established, generally accepted way of this is how we use the numbers, this is where we can really benefit our team, whether it's in the draft room, whether it's on game day, whether it's during when we're developing the game plan for the team for the game this weekend? Is there any, what are y'all's thoughts there?
I know that I'm a reliable narrator here because if I were to say that analytics is solved or close to being solved, I'm probably talking myself out of a job. But I think when we go to the combine in Indianapolis, there's all sorts of different ways that teams are thinking about these problems. Not to say that there's not any overlap between organizations. Of course, a lot of that stuff is just incidental, but there are different staff sizes. There's different problems they want to answer. So a lot of this stuff, like we get all, and Matt, you can decide how much you want to spill the beans here, but like we get teams asking, we think this data point would be valuable. Like if we had this, if we could know this specific thing empirically, that it would help us in, X, Y way. And I think we're really just reaching the tip of the iceberg. And I think that there are a lot of smart people in these organizations attacking a lot of different problems in very creative ways. So I think we're not even close to the like where baseball is at, sort of where
Yeah,
where there's
I'm
a
a decade off from that, and
at
also it's a
least.
different sport, so the nature of what you can solve for it's. But I'll yes and what Bryce is saying here by saying there are a few areas where I think that we've seen it, and that kind of are a little bit like the table stakes that you're kind of talking about, Neil. We've seen it with the game management stuff, with your fourth down decision making. That's really tightened up around the league, and we've seen a move there. Most teams have at least some sort of a function devoted to that's straddling the coaching analytics line. So that's one area that I think has been big. I think in the area of game planning, understanding tendencies, understanding just how you can make things a little bit more convenient in terms of being able to do your film study, in terms of being able to draw your play cards, all that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot of adoption there because it makes people's lives easier and gives you hours back in the day. And then the one that I think is kind of on the rise now, it's probably not every team, but it's probably at least half the teams now, and this is the biggest probably rise in influence that I've seen for data is on the performance and injury front. So having all the wearable devices, being able to pair that with one of our most popular things that we have for the NFL teams is our SIS injury data. Our injury coordinator, John Veros, and his team basically have the best information about any player that gets injured on or off the field, college or pro. And having that information allows you to model out and not tell you anything like it's the answer. Like analytics isn't the answer to anything. It's just helps you make better decisions. If you can put a percentage point on how likely somebody is to be injured in the future, how many games you'd expect them to miss over the course of their contract, you can make decisions that you couldn't make based on the old school way that I learned when I was with the Saints, which was if they've been injured, they're going to get injured before, and if they haven't, then they're not going to. You can really start to get more precision around these things. So that's been the one where we've seen the greatest probably acceleration. But to Bryce's point, there's so much. And when you think about where baseball is with pitch design and seam shifted wake and all this sort of stuff, we really, really are just scratching the surface.
All right, Bryce Rossler and Matt Manocherian of Sports Info Solutions. Y'all give us a lot to think about, and it's been a lot of fun talking with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having
Neil.
us.
Appreciate you.